One of the first people I met when I came to the fellowship more than 40 years ago was Susan Thomas. We became fast friends, and I discovered early that she is one of the kindest, caring, and generous people I have ever met. Susan is also one of the most talented people I have ever met. Those of you who have heard her sing and play violin and piano have seen only a part of her special skills. As an inner light consciousness guide, and with other spiritual knowledge and intuition, she has become a true teacher, healer, priestess. She is an ordained minister of the Fellowship of the Inner Light. She is one of the old founding members, joining the church at the age of 24, 46 years ago, believe it or not. Susan currently serves on the Pastoral Council and has served in the past on the board of directors for 8 years. When her own children were young, she worked with the children's program. She has assisted in the readings ministry by transcribing many readings that were done by Paul Solomon. She contributed to the music on Sundays for more than 40 years. With all of that, Susan considers her main ministry music and motherhood. She is a musician and music teacher teaching violin, viola, cello, and piano. And she is the office manager of the fellowship and editor of the weekly email newsletter. She is the mother of 2 daughters, Leah Thomas Montague and Jennifer Ann Thomas. She has a bachelor's degree of music education from James Madison University, where she majored in violin and minored in piano and voice. Her graduate work was done in choral and orchestra conducting. She played violin in the Virginia Symphony for 14 years. It is her great love to compose orchestral music and songs. Let us welcome our own Susan Thomas.
Thank you, Sharon. We have so many wonderful people who come up to introduce speakers that by the time they're done, we never know what they're going to say. We wonder, oh, gee, can I live up to all that? But, I look out on these faces. Everyone here is remarkable. Every soul here is so remarkable. The fact you are here and your presence is in the seat is what creates all of this. And I just love to honor that. We don't always hear that, but to me it's everything. And we're all family, and I am so glad to be a part of this spiritual family. Before I begin to speak the talk, let's just have a little moment of prayer. Source of our being, friends from all dimensions, we welcome you. And we thank you, love, God, source of our being, for always living in us, through us, and as us. Amen. Well, happy spring. And when I found out I was speaking less than a week ago, the funny part, you really will enjoy this. I went to this amazing conference, the Coptic Fellowship Conference International in Johnson City, Tennessee. And in fact, someone from the ARE spoke, John Van Auken, and many other wonderful speakers. So Lloyd and I were very fed by that. And on the way back home, I'm thinking, well, this will be a good 2 weeks to keep a low profile and be, incognito and hide under the covers or in back and just incubate. And well, God has other plans when you're planning your day. And so somehow, though, it's all rich and beautiful, and God has a sense of humor, indeed. And so anyway, here I am. And if we could name it one topic today, it's going to be spring cleaning. It is that time of year. I can tell Steve just loves doing spring cleaning. Oh, yes. And we've all done it successfully and not successfully in the past, I'm sure, in our homes and our yards. Sometimes it's hard just to get the energy up, isn't it? Because you're busy with other things, but you know it needs done. And typically we think of this, and I want you to hold this image throughout this talk. You have a pile called keep. You have one called giveaway. And you have one called throwaway. And a lot of us make one called maybe. Because we take longer than we thought we would because, I don't know, maybe so-and-so will need this. And then, but the problem comes if your maybe pile gets bigger than the others, right? And you have to go back to the drawing board. But I think it helps to try to have patience, compassion, and a sense of humor for yourself while you're doing spring cleaning. And sometimes you have to do it in spurts. Well, that's talking about houses and yards. What about spring cleaning of the rest of our lives, our minds, our emotions, our spirit, our soul, whatever you want to call it? I thought, well, wouldn't it be great to keep using all the tools we know work, but add a simplification of simply create the keep pile, the giveaway pile, and the throwaway pile. So a little bit later, we're going to do an experiential where we will work with that. Now, some of the presences, the consciousness that has touched me this week are 3 people. And I'm going to be sharing some of their ideas in this talk. One of them is Hildegard von Bingen, one is Paul Solomon, and one is Edgar Cayce. And I'm going to start with telling you a little bit about Hildegard von Bingen. For those of you who haven't heard of her, she was born in 1098, a little while ago. She's had a few birthdays since then. And she was born in Germany. She was the 10th child of a family, and back then they tithed to the church, so at maybe the tender age of 8, she was placed in with the nuns to finish being raised there and become in that lifestyle. Well, she wasn't your typical anybody, though. She was an outspoken critic of political and ecclesiastical corruption. She courted controversy. She did spring cleaning really well. She really did. An amazing person. And she called the power of the universe, or God, the greening power of the universe. And that feels like spring, doesn't it? Things are budding, it's getting green, it's reminding us of creation, of co-creation. And one of the things she said that was very poetic, I would like to read to you. She said, and of course it rhymed in German, this is English, but the message is there. I am the breeze that nurtures all things green. I encourage blossoms to flourish with ripening fruits. I am the rain coming from the dew that causes the grasses to laugh with the joy of life. That touches me a lot. And there's another poem of hers which I'll read at the end of the talk. And I should mention now that when I found this, I typed it into Word on the computer, decided to have lunch, and turn on Netflix to watch another episode of Call the Midwife. I don't know if any of you have seen that. It's one of my favorites. So within 2 minutes, they had a scene where the nuns were saying, we're going to do a ritual to honor one of our people that came before us. I thought they're probably talking about somebody in the 1900s. And they mentioned the word Hildegard, and they read the exact thing I had just typed. So I think that's trying to say Hildegard's reaching through the centuries to, I'm getting goosebumps, to bless us now with her insights. Her insights. She felt that humankind was called to co-create, and that God created us so that we might cultivate this earth and create heaven here. It's not you wait and you go somewhere. And she personally did not believe in the thing called hell. She felt that there was a tragedy of when you dry up and ignore the greening power, as she calls it, and then nothing's created. There was a time when she had a dark night of the soul and she felt she had dried up. She went through a period where she refused to write her visions, refused to share her images. Well, she had a resurrection. It was in the springtime, in fact, and an awakening. And she was so creative that from her 42nd year until she passed away at 83, she did amazing amounts of music, poetry, art, letter writing, preaching, healing, painting, organizing, and founding. She was an amazing, amazing, prolific person. They have a statue of her in Germany now, that they honor her. And I marvel at how the stuff could last that long. Do you have trouble finding something in your closet? Maybe you just wrote, okay. Well, somehow she's had the protectors all along of her work, and it has been passed to us. There are a lot of books out there. I recommend you look at them or look online, and you'll find inspiration from this incredible ancestor of ours. And now I want to share, this leads me to sharing about a Paul Salmon reading. To my knowledge, this one would never have been talked about in public before this moment. Okay? And most readings are made public, and they just erase the names. I think they do that with the Edgar Cayce readings. But some readings remain totally private because part of the reading is something personal, perhaps about someone's child or something to that effect. This particular reading was done for a mother, and information about the child came in there, which was for the mother to know, to understand the child, but not for it to be public, because in this incarnation the child might not need to hear this information, and it might even be harmful if she wasn't ready for it. There was a lot of other stuff in the reading, however, that is totally appropriate to be public, and I think it's appropriate because it talks about the fellowship of the inner light. One of the things it talked about was that the fellowship of the inner light could be called a state of consciousness that existed before Paul Salmon was born. Before this building was here, before it became anything called the fellowship of the inner light. And it's a group of souls who are working on being the light bearers and the light workers in healing. We all relate to that who sit in this room. It talked about that. Then it talked about this person who had been part of the beginning of the Nazi Party in Germany, in the early days of it, the inception of it. And it stated that the Nazi Party did not start out to become what it later became, where we all go, oh my gosh, the stuff that happened. It started out as a group of young people who wanted to make a better world. The few founders that there were. And as often happens in a benevolent organization or a spiritual organization that starts out with lots of light, the moths are drawn to the flame. And sometimes they have great disguises and they fool people. And then it gets to a certain level and they can't seem to stop how something changed. And so the reading was calling on all people, whether you're in a cultural organization, a spiritual organization, an artistic organization, to pray for intuition and meditate so that you will notice little red flags. So that you don't wait till it's a war already, to be able to possibly do something about it, to change the course. And if you've missed it, to never beat yourself up. You forgive and you move on. Even in a relationship, sometimes the way to set the boundary is to leave it. And sometimes we have to leave a job we're in, or where we live, what street we're on, whatever. But it really equated with people would have trouble believing it started as something good. And then there were people who saw the power-hungry people who came into it, including the leader of the movement, Hitler, and they thought, ooh, something's not right, but they didn't feel they could do anything about it. And so sometimes, if something's huge and it involves thousands of people, you might not be able to go in that day and fix it, but what you can fix is yourself. And don't forget how powerful that is and how it ripples out to the rest of the world. You can work on yourself, your immediate environments, your family. And it said it was so easy, even for hardened criminals in a prison, they would point the finger and go, oh my gosh, that Hitler, how horrible. And of course it is, a Holocaust was, all of that. But he said, but you can't, you feel powerless, like what can I do to change that? I can't change history. He said, when was the last time you thought a hate thought about yourself? A put down of yourself? That's a form of murder. It's sucking the joy out of your life, the life force out of you. That is something you can do something about. You can forgive yourself. And if you don't believe it yet, start treating yourself like you want others to treat you and like you want to treat others. It's an interesting dance. And I think we all, who here hasn't had self-talk sometimes that I'm not good enough, I didn't do that well, all that kind of stuff. Now that may not create war on the planet, but it sure creates war in you. And peace begins with you. And I know, Steve, you prayed for peace today. It's all about, it's a daily thing we have to do, isn't it? It's a job being here on earth. Have you noticed? We should be paid, right? Just to show up. We showed up. Okay, what are we going to do now? All right. But really, it helps. I do my best in all these things and studies and what you use just to have patience, compassion, and a sense of humor. And the spirit of forgiveness. Because we're all going to fall down. We just have to help each other get back up. And so I find that that's all so important. And some of us who were here in the 70s, I'm one of them, attended a meeting. It was probably around 1976. We had a house on 37th Street that's not there now. It's a different building attached to Teddy's health food store. Some of you know where that is. And then there's the little breezeway, and then there's a building. It used to be an old house there. And the fellowship owned that house and had meetings there and offices there. It's where I met Sharon. A man who was a member of the French underground during World War II, named Frederick Lionel, came. Carol remembers and Sarah remembers. Most of you weren't there at that meeting, or we didn't even know some of you then. But Frederick Lionel was a young man during the war. And he was in France with a bunch of others. They called it the French Underground. They helped save thousands of Jews and dissidents and people. And even before the worst of it started, because they were meditators in a metaphysical group, and they affiliated with Rudolf Steiner and some others, they caught on to what seemed to be brewing before the rest of the world would believe it. And so the one thing they could do initially was diligently get together, discuss, pray, and meditate every day about the situation. And they had certain occult tools they used for the good to really send the energy into places. And they recognized that the man we call Hitler, he started out one way and then things happened and he took another path. In fact, Edgar Cayce is often misquoted by fundamentalists as saying, oh, don't go to the ARE. Hitler, was loved by Cayce. And that's not how that came to the reading. At the time he did the reading, the question that was asked, he was coming into the politics and he was creating jobs and doing stuff, and he was a very powerful soul. And so Cayce said, look at this one. He may, it's always a choice, he may do something good for Germany. But people have often maligned. I've heard a friend of mine who worked in a high clearance job, some fundamentalist came in and passed out papers saying, don't go over there, blah, 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 So a lot of misinterpretation can happen. Isn't that interesting? Just the turn of a sentence or a word. But he took another path. But anyway, so here's what Frederick Lionel did. He and some of the other boys who looked Aryan, they decided to infiltrate a Hitler Youth rally. Do you remember hearing any of this part? Anyway, they infiltrated, pretending to be German. They spoke very well. They would never have been caught as not German because they worked at it a long, we're talking very dedicated, long time. Risked their lives doing this, but they went to the Hitler Youth rally. And there were hundreds, thousands probably of people there. And they knew what they were about, and they just wanted to be there and see for themselves how is all this happening, this mesmerizing thing that Hitler's doing, this attaching to where people are in automatic and getting mob energy going. That I don't even know what else word to put to it. And Frederick Lionel had trouble describing it. He said, we knew what we knew while we were there, and we felt ourselves being sucked in. We had to fight it. We had to fight it. And we wouldn't have thought that would be the case. But we had to fight it like there was an energy that was so strong. It was trying to almost make me go unconscious, is what he said. So what he did was invoke the presence of the Christ. That's what worked for him, calling it the Christ energy. He invoked Jesus to help. He invoked angels. He invoked all that comes in the name of love, peace, joy, and healing, and nothing else can be there or cross that threshold. But he had to work hard. It wasn't just a simple little, when you're with your friends and everything's fine, affirmation. He worked so hard, and they got out of there as quick as they could and went back to France. And they knew what they were up against. But they found out what they could do to make it better. By finding out something that helped them in their own lives and giving them the courage and the power to step forth. And sometimes you just have to do something. It has to go from prayer and meditation into action. It's going to be different actions for different situations, different people. But hearing those stories, is so rich for us. And it encourages us all to do not underestimate the power of a thought you have, a feeling you have, the way you express it, a prayer that you put out, an intention you put out, a meditation that you do. It's perhaps one of the most powerful works to do on this planet. Because it's a small planet, it's big too. And there's a lot of people, a lot of situations. And we certainly could handle a little bit of change today. There have been other situations, not just Hitler and Nazi Germany, where there have been mass killings. And war itself, of course, is insane when something gets to that level. So, my advice is when we feel like really down and depressed with the actual news, the facts of what's going on in the world, let alone in our own lives, take a moment and think of some of the people that have gone before you, perhaps that have encouraged you, that you have made a difference. You just don't know where it all ripples. I'm sure these people, their love is rippling into us now. Hildegard von Bingen's love, Paul Solomon's love. You're sitting in here, and the love you're feeling and the intention to support the light and the peace is rippling out into the neighborhood. Somebody could be sitting depressed over in a house over there, and they suddenly feel better and they don't know why. I've heard stories like that where scientists measure stuff, and they'll say certain things extend out 3 miles, 10 miles, whatever. So, you are powerful beings. We are powerful beings. And what we're going to do right now is a little meditation where I'm going to invite you to think about, it could be a person, a place, a thing, a situation, a relationship, just something you're concerned about. And you pick it, you get to pick it in this meditation. And I'm going to guide you into working with your keep bag and your throwaway bag, and your give it away bag, so that you can make a contact with something perhaps that you would like to release or change. And I'm going to ring the Tibetan bell first, and then I will lead you through this. We invite the cosmos in to help us with our spring cleaning. The situation you have chosen in your mind is with you, and you are the orchestrator of the story. Look at the situation and go over to your keep it bag. What do you wish to keep about this scenario? Take a moment to think of that. And when you are ready, you can place that into your bag of what you're keeping. Your bag could be a box or a basket, whatever form you want it to be, but it is your keep it bag. And now, when you're ready, take from the situation what you do not want to keep, that you actually want to put into the trash. This is your throw it away, actually. Throw it away bag. Know that this bag will go to the divine garbage. It will become compost for a good garden. So you can safely put in there whatever you wish to release, whatever you'd rather throw away from the situation you're thinking of. And when you are ready, I invite you to go to the bag that says giveaway. Or it could be better put, what do I have to give to myself and to others? What is the gold nugget? The transformation, alchemy, gold nugget that has come from this catalyst. If you can name it, name it. And this is what I will draw upon to empower me to be who I really am and to have that which I have to give to myself and others. Or return to myself when perhaps I had stopped giving it and now I give it again. One of these bags is not better than another bag. All of the processes, the journey, all of it is sacred. And sometimes you might spend a week or longer identifying what you want to keep, or what you want to throw in the trash, or what you want to give or give away. But the tool is permanently yours. And the universe is behind you and helping you to let go of the old, open the windows, let the new air in, the new empowerment, the new life. And in doing this, you help generations that came before you and generations that come after you. For the ripple of love is eternal and not confined to time and space. Remember that Jesus said, "Ye are gods, and all these things you can do and more." When you're ready, you can wiggle your fingers, your toes, and stay in the peace of this, but return your consciousness to this room. little bit of time. I'm calling John up here because before church today, I spoke to him about Hildegard von Bingen, and he's reading a book. What was it called?
It's called The Beguines.
Can you tell us who they are?
Somebody responded there.
Yeah.
They're a group of women who are not well known, starting from
Hildegard?
pretty far back, I don't know the date, but
Yeah.
who were self-organized just outside of the church.
Your glasses are right. We share a vision. I got mine too. I might,
It's impossible to say the whole story
No,
about
but
the
just
Beguines
that they.
right now, but they self-organized, they protected their visionaries,
That's it.
they paid taxes, and they helped the poor and did a lot of education, so nobody really messed with them.
Yeah.
And they were somehow part of this. I don't remember the details.
Somehow, Hildegard was that type of situation with her nuns. I mean, they did things you couldn't have done in most of those places. And the kind of plays they put on, and the music she did, the art, the things she studied and spoke outwardly about, and she spoke up amazingly for women and children's causes. And she had a real respect for all humans and all sentient beings, and for men, women, and children. And they had some men who, it needed to be men who protected the women who were the visionaries, who did the visions. And oftentimes, the women hadn't even been educated and couldn't write themselves, but were tuned in and brought the visions in and spoke it, and some of them were their scribes. Volmar was such a person with Hildegard. And they often found that there was a power in the polarity of the male voice and the female voice speaking together sometimes. And so John and I are going to read one little thing here that I'll preface, where we say her idea of what she wants to leave you about what God does with you and how you're part of God. This is her vision of God. So we start right here together.
Okay.
Come on up. All right. God hugs you. You are encircled by the arms of a mystery God. A mystery God. God's power is not abstract or vengeful, but maternal, loving, and a deeply personal power. It is compassionate power. Nobody has the power to divide this circle, to surpass it, or to limit it. So be it. We're all in the circle. And I have just one more thing to say about that circle. I was actually told, not just me, some other teachers in the school system were told by an administrator, do not ever put children in circles or use stories to teach them. I'm like, what? They thought it meant we would be not in the circle with the kids, but our back would be to some and they'd be terribly misbehaving. It didn't occur to them we could all be in the circle. But when I used circles, especially little children, it was powerful, and the children related to that sense of circle, you see, symbolically and otherwise. So I'm suggesting, and I'm sure we all agree, let's open our hearts and open our circle to include all of creation. Let us honor ourselves and each other in a way that creates compassion, forgiveness, love, joy, and co-creation. Happy spring. Let's frolic in creation. Thank you.